Salutations everybody, it is Matty here today, sitting down to talk again about CD Projekt Red. I know we've been on a little kick with them lately, and it continues to roll as they drop more news. Today we are gathering to talk about the splits in development right now and where CD Projekt Red is focusing all their efforts. Especially this is important because of how many projects they have in development. We're also going to talk about The Witcher again, but this time it's The Witcher Remake, where there's been some key details confirmed for it. Details that I think will please quite a few people. And last but not least, we're also going to get into the voice acting situation for The Witcher Remake, as well as the financial situation for CD Projekt Red, because, after Cyberpunk 2077, things weren't looking too hot for them. So ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me. Thank you so much for the support on the content lately. I do appreciate it. And with that, if you're new here, you're into CD Projekt Red news, meaning The Witcher or Cyberpunk, consider subscribing. We cover both. And with that, let's dive in, starting off with those development splits I was talking about. Now, this chart will look familiar to you. You've seen this in the past. We've used this throughout various financial reports by CD Projekt Red. And this time, this is the latest update for it. And you can see, as of October 31st, 2022, the bottom bar here, you can see that the current main focus for the company is the Cyberpunk 2077 expansion, Phantom Liberty. This is what we want to see. A lot of people were worried when they saw the next-gen update scaling down in the terms of support. Some folks were worried that Cyberpunk was on the way out, but we've seen it scale up over time now since the announcement of this new expansion. There are also little details sprinkled throughout here on these ongoing projects. For example, the Molasses Flood, which is the dark orange all the way on the right, you can see is gradually scaling up. And perhaps what's most interesting here is that you see Polaris, the brand new Witcher game for the new trilogy, has scaled up over time as well, starting off in July. The Witcher 3 Next Gen version never had that big of a team throughout this year, and likely that team has moved on over into the Phantom Liberty project. I do have feelings on that one, because when I think about them scaling that down, I think of all the promises they made after update 1.6, where they were going to overhaul the police system and other new updates would come to the game. We haven't seen much of that, as they've diverted a lot of the public's attention over to The Witcher 3's Next Gen update, which I'm equally excited for. But I'm curious if what they've decided to do, and perhaps this is actually the case, is fold in some of these updates that were going to be free as a part of the game into this new expansion, Phantom Liberty. Otherwise, you know that they are working on another Cyberpunk game. They're setting up a new studio, so that's why that's absent here, because really work hasn't begun on that, and you can't start the sequel until you get the expansion right, and the expansion, I think, will inform us a lot on the sequel, given the fact that the expansion will be next-gen only. But I like the splits here. I like what I'm seeing in the terms of ongoing projects and what's scaling up, but it looks like we're going to be getting comfortable with The Witcher for the next couple of years. So if you're not a Witcher fan, you're only a Cyberpunk fan, apologies to you, because CD Projekt Red is about to make it rain Witcher content. Speaking of which, let's sit down and talk a little bit more about it. Let's get into The Witcher Remake, which has been confirmed to be an open world game. For those who never played The Witcher 1, and raise your hand if you haven't, that would be me. I have not played this one yet. I personally didn't know much about this game outside of gameplay online. That might be a good video one day, like So I Tried Playing the original Witcher. Let me know if you'd want to see that. But anyway, this game is very different from what you saw in The Witcher 2 and 3, where The Witcher 2 represented what I believe was a clean slate based off what I've learned online, where it was a fresh start. You could get into the series starting there, and there was more continuity between 2 and 3 than 1 and 2. And it looks like maybe The Witcher 1 Remake will adjust that a little bit, at least in the terms of gameplay, where even The Witcher 2 was a bit more open-ended. I kind of miss those days, though. I have a soft spot for The Witcher 2, but let's get into some of those details that were confirmed by CD Projekt Red. According to IGN, CD Projekt Red has confirmed that its Unreal Engine 5 remake of 2007's The Witcher will be fully open world. Revealed during its third quarter financial results, CD Projekt Red briefly mentioned its announcement of The Witcher Remake, saying that it will be a story-driven, single-player, open-world RPG. CD Projekt Red didn't say anything else about the new game, reiterating its point made in October that, quote, "It's gonna be a while until we can share more details," end quote. Quote, "The Witcher is where it all started for us, for CD Projekt Red. It was the first game we made ever, and it was a big moment for us then. Going back to this place and remaking the game for the next generation of gamers to experience it feels just as big, if not bigger, end quote, added studio head Adam Badowski at the time. Now, The Witcher 1 takes place in Vizima, which you do see in The Witcher 3. You don't get to explore it in full. It's very brief, and it's kind of a cool dip back into the past now as I've learned this, but that's where this game is going to be set. And if you didn't play The Witcher 1, it's segmented into levels, so once you go into the next one, you can't go back to the old one. It is a little bit old school in that manner, which I don't always think is a bad thing. I do like a sense of open-endedness, and I do like being able to return to certain areas, but I do like a conclusion to a certain arc and know that I am moving on to the next thing. However, it looks like in The Witcher 1's remake, they are really opening things up. And I'm curious what they do now that they're making Witcher 1 open world and Witcher 3 open world, if they're going to leave Witcher 2 Assassins of Kings in the place it's at right now, which I think is totally fine, but there could be room for a remake there for sure, just to open things up, do what you previously couldn't do, and especially shine some light on it as a game that, right next to The Witcher 1, didn't get a lot of attention. I think The Witcher 2 would have got even more attention, not that it was completely buried, but I think it would have done better if it wasn't launching near another fantasy RPG that same year. That was Skyrim. I mean, for those who lived through Skyrim's release date, which I imagine most of you watching this have, you know just how insane that was. You had to be there. It was just inescapable. It was everywhere. Everyone was playing it. So when you're a fantasy RPG launching that year, it's tough, let alone even if you're not even in that genre, it was tough to launch near Skyrim. So it was a dominant video game for its time, and I think there is room for a remake there. But in the terms of Witcher 1 remake, I gotta say that I don't know how much I'm craving open world Witcher content at times. And call me crazy for that, but when I look at the gameplay structure for The Witcher 3, I do love spending time in that world, and I do love some of the question mark content that's there as you explore the world. And it becomes a bit of a rabbit hole, right? You find a question mark, you kill a couple enemies, you find a note there, which puts another question mark, you go there, and then you find another camp, and boom, now there's another quest that you've now got, which is a scavenger hunt, which leads you to another question mark. It's just, it feels like an insanely broad game, and those games are fantastic. A lot of people who cover video games try to act like that type of content is bad because they are personally fatigued by it, and I don't think that's right because, again, I grew up with very little money, so when I saw a game that was as wide as an ocean and as deep as it as well, like The Witcher 3 was, I ate that up. So I do think people need to understand and respect there is a desire for this more, we'll say, content with longevity. With that said, though, I'm more so talking about the design of this open world and how there was a checklist nature to The Witcher 3, but I think it was largely ignored because the story was phenomenal. Gwent was a great surprise. There were a lot of things tucked away in there. The free DLC was a great surprise as well. So they really started to take over and get a strong public image. But now that the surprises are gone and greatness is expected, how can The Witcher pretty much surpass our expectations now that we have the bar set in a certain place? Because I think of it a lot like Fallout and Elder Scrolls of Bethesda. I have my expectations for Fallout in a different place as Elder Scrolls because I understand what these IP mean to the company making them. The Witcher means a lot more than Cyberpunk. And I don't think that CD Projekt Red would have dropped a Witcher game like they did with Cyberpunk 2077. Same thing with Bethesda. I don't think they would have dropped an Elder Scrolls game that was like Fallout 76. Ever. So I know their treatment's going to be better of The Witcher, and I'm curious what they do to inch things forward in open world, or if they're going to copy what they did with The Witcher 3. We'll see. But anyway, moving on to voice acting now. Of course, Doug Cockle is the voice of Geralt, the famous voice of Geralt since the first Witcher game, and it's hard to imagine him being anyone else, sounding like anyone else. But you may want to know that they have yet to contact him. Here's what Doug Cockle said to Eurogamer. "I'd be there in an instant," Cockle said in an interview with Eurogamer, speaking about returning to re-record lines. "I know about as much as you do at this moment. All I know is that CD Projekt Red has announced that they're going to remake Witcher 1 in Unreal Engine 5, and that's what I know. So I don't know if they're going to bring me back to do the re-recording of dialogue. I don't know if they're going to use dialogue from The Witcher 1 as it exists. I don't know." So long as Doug Cockle breathes, I find it hard to imagine that, as we know right now, they called him back for The Witcher 3's next-gen update to re-record some lines for a Netflix DLC quest. So if they're going to call him in for that, I find myself hard-pressed to imagine they're not going to call him back for The Witcher 1. I think if continuity is the focus here, and they're going to try to string things together a little bit more, then I imagine Doug will get the call. It's just a matter of time, and this game seems to be very early in development where voice work probably isn't in the consideration department right now, especially given how much of the budget that can take over. You want to get deep enough, know what you're going to write, because I imagine parts of the game are going to be rewritten for more continuity. So we'll see where it goes. I would not panic about this at all until CD Projekt Red says, no, we're not bringing him in. Then we can have that conversation. But right now, I would not worry about this at all. So with that, we move into our final story where we talk about the financial results for Q3 of 2022 for CD Projekt Red. I know this is one of those stories where you look at it and go, why does this matter? But I think it's interesting to track because when you saw how cratering the release of Cyberpunk 2077 was to some extent, where it didn't really have the legs that they anticipated, that investors anticipated, and their stock value tanked, it's interesting to see that in Q3 they had their best Q3 yet, and it was thanks to Cyberpunk. So let's read a little bit. In terms of financials, this was the best third quarter in our entire history, with consolidated revenue at $246 million. Mostly owing the strong sales of Cyberpunk, the group posted 99 million PLN in net profit, said their chief financial officer. This translates into a net profitability of 40% for the whole group and a whopping 47% for the CD Projekt Red segment. So they're doing really well, and this was thanks to, of course, a sale with Cyberpunk 2077 over on Steam, Edge Runners, and patch 1.6. It just shows what I've been saying for a while now as updates have rolled out, is people really wanted to love Cyberpunk 2077. I find myself hard-pressed to believe that anyone who was picking up Cyberpunk bought it with the intent to hate it, because there was a lot of hype behind it. The game looked awesome ahead of its release, and even when you played it, if you didn't like it, I think it was one of those games that irritated you because you saw so much potential in it. So to see CD Projekt Red not want to give up on it makes you not want to give up on it, and I think that just worked perfectly. When you time out your best, biggest update alongside what's happening with Edge Runners, I mean, people are going to go to that game in mass, and that's exactly what happened, where they had over 1 million players daily. That is crazy to think about, especially for a single-player RPG 2 years removed from its release this December. Really awesome to see the bounce back. It's something I've always been very supportive of, but I'm glad to see people coming around and enjoying it. And now we're seeing CD Projekt Red has reaped the benefits of that, despite selling the game at times for $10 after its release, or selling the game on sale on Steam. They've still managed to be extremely profitable that way, at least in this quarter. Keep in mind, Q3 is typically a dead time of the year, so this has worked out for them in a really strange way. But I digress. Ladies and gentlemen, that's everything I got for you when it comes to CD Projekt Red. Let me know what you're thinking in the comments down below. Other than that, follow me on Twitter, follow me on Instagram. Those links are in the description down below. And a big thank you to all the patrons, all the members who continue to support the hell out of the content here. Stay sexy, stay active. I love you all. Peace.